The unexpected encounter. The spaceship glided smoothly through the void of space, its engines humming with a quiet power. The Nebula Voyager was on a routine exploration mission, charting unknown regions of the galaxy. Its crew, a mix of humans and aliens, were used to finding strange and fascinating things. But nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to discover. It all started when the ship's sensors picked up a strange signal. It wasn't anything like the usual signals they received from distant stars or planets. This was different. It was a low-frequency pulse, almost like a heartbeat, faint but persistent. It seemed to be coming from a nearby asteroid field. Captain Jara Koran, a seasoned leader with years of spacefaring experience, immediately ordered the crew to investigate. "Prepare for a detour. Let's see what this signal is all about," she commanded, her voice calm but filled with curiosity. The asteroid field was dense, its massive rocks drifting slowly through the cold, dark space. The ship maneuvered carefully between them, the crew scanning for anything unusual. They didn't expect to find much. Asteroid fields were common in this part of space, and they had been through countless ones before. But as they ventured deeper, something caught the eye of Lieutenant Rico, the ship's lead navigator. "Captain, you might want to see this," he said, his voice filled with surprise. The crew gathered around the screen as Rico pointed out a strange object drifting among the asteroids. It wasn't like any ship or space station they had ever seen. It was a large rectangular structure, smooth and polished, with what appeared to be glowing symbols carved into its surface. It looked like a billboard, but there was no mistaking the sense of power it radiated. "What is that?" Captain Jara asked, more to herself than anyone else. Lieutenant Rico zoomed in the ship's sensors for a closer look. The symbols on the object were unlike any known language. They didn't match anything in the ship's database, not even close. It was as if this object had come from a place beyond the crew's understanding. "It's definitely not natural," Rico muttered, scanning the object further. "And it seems alive somehow. It's reacting to our presence." The crew fell silent, exchanging uncertain glances. They had found alien technology before, but this was something entirely different. This object seemed to be more than just a relic or a machine. It was as if it had a purpose, a meaning, something waiting to be discovered. "We should approach it carefully," Captain Jara decided. "Prepare the shuttle. Let's see if we can get a closer look." Minutes later, a small shuttle detached from the Nebula Voyager and made its way toward the strange object. Inside the shuttle, Captain Jara, Lieutenant Rico, and two other crew members, Engineer Zila and Communications Officer Tarek, suited up and prepared for whatever they might find. As they neared the object, the symbols on its surface began to glow brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the faint heartbeat-like signal they had first detected. There was an eerie, almost hypnotic quality to it, making the crew feel as though they were being drawn in. The closer they got, the more the strange energy surrounding the object seemed to pull at them, filling the shuttle with an electric tension. When they were just a few meters away, the shuttle's systems began to flicker. The lights dimmed, and the instruments on the dashboard blinked erratically. Tarek, the communications officer, tried to make contact with the object, but his attempts were met with static. "Something's blocking our signals," Tarek said, frustration evident in his voice. "It's like it's absorbing all our communications." Captain Jara's heart raced, but she kept her calm. "Keep going," she ordered. "Let's see what it does if we get closer." The shuttle hovered just in front of the object, and for a moment, everything was still. Then, without warning, the symbols on the object flared to life, and a sharp pulse of energy shot out from it. The pulse struck the shuttle, sending a jolt of electricity through its systems. Sparks flew, and the crew braced themselves. For a few seconds, the shuttle was caught in a swirling field of energy, its systems malfunctioning. But just as quickly as the pulse had hit, it faded away, leaving the shuttle floating in the silence of space. "Status?" Captain Jara asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "We're fine," Lieutenant Rico replied. The shuttle's power is back online, but something's different. I feel like we're being watched. Captain Jara felt it too, a strange, unsettling sensation, as if the object was aware of them. She couldn't explain it, but the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. "We need to get back to the Nebula Voyager and report this," she said, her mind racing with questions. "But first, let's take a closer look at the object. There has to be more to it." As they carefully approached the surface of the billboard, they noticed something unusual, a crack in the smooth metal. It was just a small fracture, but it looked out of place. Inside, there was a faint glow, as if something was hidden deep within. "I don't like this," Zyla, the engineer, muttered. "It feels wrong." But Captain Jara ignored the warning in her voice. "We're already this far. Let's see what's inside." As the crew began to investigate the crack, a soft, almost imperceptible hum filled the shuttle. The object, once dormant, began to react to their presence again. It felt as though it were waiting for something. And then, as the crew continued to probe deeper, something unexpected happened. A door, hidden beneath the surface of the object, slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dark interior. A chill ran down Captain Jora's spine. Whatever lay inside, it was something far beyond their understanding. "Ready yourselves," she said softly. "We've just opened the door to something we may not be able to control." And with that, they entered the unknown. The bumper stickers. The strange door slid open with a low, mechanical hiss, revealing an interior far darker and more complex than the crew had anticipated. Inside, the object seemed hollow, like the shell of a long-forgotten ship, its walls lined with intricate, glowing patterns. It felt as though the very air around them was vibrating with an energy they couldn't quite comprehend. The crew stepped cautiously inside, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. "Stay close and keep your comms open," Captain Jara ordered, her voice firm but uneasy. She could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Lieutenant Rico scanned the walls with his portable device, trying to make sense of the glowing symbols. "These patterns," he muttered, "they're not like anything we've seen. They don't match any known technology, not even the ancient relics we found." Tarek, the communications officer, was busy working on the shuttle's console, trying to establish contact with the Nebula Voyager. But the signal was still blocked, as if something in this alien space was disrupting all transmissions. "This is bizarre," Tarek said, his brow furrowed. "It's like we're in a bubble, cut off from everything. We can't even get a signal back to the ship." The crew exchanged worried glances. They were in uncharted territory, and every instinct told them to be cautious. But the discovery was too important to turn back now. As they ventured deeper into the object's hollow interior, they came across something unexpected, a collection of small, bright stickers attached to the walls. They were simple, almost childish in appearance, but with a strange, unsettling quality. Some had pictures of alien creatures, others symbols the crew couldn't understand, and a few had images that seemed to shift and change when looked at from different angles. "What the hell is this?" Zyla, the engineer, asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Bumper stickers. Are we seriously looking at bumper stickers inside this ancient artifact?" The stickers looked out of place, but there was no denying their presence. They were all over the walls, scattered in a haphazard, random fashion. Each one seemed to tell its own small story, but the language was cryptic, puzzling, and oddly familiar at the same time. Captain Jara approached one of the stickers, a simple red one with the image of a strange, multi-eyed creature. The creature seemed to stare back at her, its eyes filled with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Beneath the image were words in a language she didn't recognize, but the feeling it gave her was unmistakable. This wasn't just decoration. This was a message. "Are these some kind of warning?" Lieutenant Rico asked, his voice hesitant as he examined a sticker with a symbol of a broken chain. "Is someone trying to tell us something?" Before anyone could answer, a low, pulsing hum echoed from deeper within the object. The crew froze. every muscle tensed. The hum grew louder, vibrating through their bones. The walls around them seemed to shift, and the glowing symbols on the walls flickered erratically. That's not normal," Tarek said, his voice tight with worry. "Something's reacting to us." Suddenly, without warning, the sticker with the multi-eyed creature began to glow brighter, the eyes seeming to move, following their every motion. A strange whispering sound filled the air, a voice just beyond the range of comprehension. It was faint, like a distant echo, but it sent a chill through the crew. "What is that?" Zola whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "I don't like this. It feels like it's speaking to us." The crew stood in stunned silence, unsure of what was happening. The glow from the sticker intensified, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, the glow faded, and the whispering stopped. The air felt heavy again, as though the object was holding its breath, waiting. "We need to leave," Captain Jara said, her voice firm. "This is too dangerous. We don't know what we're dealing with here." But as the crew turned to make their way back to the shuttle, they noticed something strange. More stickers had appeared on the walls, ones that hadn't been there before, and this time, the images weren't playful or cryptic. They were ominous. One sticker showed an image of a giant hand, clenched into a fist, with the words "Don't let them win" written beneath it. Another depicted a starship being swallowed by a massive black hole, with the words "Escape is not an option." "What the hell?" Lieutenant Rico murmured, his voice barely audible. "Where did these come from?" Tarek was already at the shuttle's console, his fingers moving rapidly over the buttons. "We're not getting out," he said urgently. "Something's blocking our exit. The shuttle's systems. They're locked." Panic spread quickly through the crew as the humming sound grew louder again, vibrating through the very air. The walls of the object seemed to pulse with energy, and the glowing symbols began to change, rearranging themselves into a pattern that almost seemed to form. A face. It was an alien face, with eyes that glowed like stars. "We're not alone," Captain Jara whispered, her eyes wide with realization. "This place, it's alive, and it's trying to tell us something." Before she could say more, the floor beneath them trembled. The object groaned, as if awakening from a long slumber, and a bright light erupted from the center of the room. The crew shielded their eyes, but the light wasn't blinding. It was calling to them. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the light faded. The object fell silent, and for a brief moment, everything was still. But Captain Jara knew one thing for sure: their discovery was no accident. The object, the symbols, and now the bumper stickers, they were part of something much larger, something that had been waiting for them. And they were just beginning to understand the gravity of what they had uncovered. "We need to get back to the Nebula Voyager," Captain Jara said, her voice urgent. "This is only the beginning." And with that, the crew turned, determined to find answers before it was too late. But deep down, they all knew one thing: this was just the first chapter of a much darker story, and they were already too far in to turn back. The human enigma. The shuttle rocketed through the asteroid field, its engines roaring in protest as it sped toward the Nebula Voyager. Inside, the crew was silent, each member lost in their thoughts, their minds racing with the strange discovery they had just made. The eerie hum of the alien artifact still echoed in their heads, and the glowing symbols seemed to be imprinted on their vision. The memory of the shifting bumper stickers, with their cryptic warnings, weighed heavily on them. What had they really uncovered? And why was it so personal? As they docked with the Nebula Voyager, the crew felt a sense of relief, but it was quickly replaced by a gnawing unease. The unknown was too close now, and there was no turning back. Captain Jara was the first to speak as they filed out of the shuttle. "Get to your stations. Report any anomalies immediately. I'll meet with the council in an hour." The crew scattered, each member retreating to their respective duties, but the air aboard the ship felt thick, almost suffocating. It was as if the ship itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Lieutenant Rico made his way to the ship's observation deck, a place where he could see the stars stretch into infinity. He needed time to think, to process everything they had just witnessed. The glowing stickers, the ancient alien artifact, the cryptic messages, it all seemed so deliberate. Someone or something had been trying to send them a message. And that wasn't all. The strange symbols on the object had been eerily familiar, almost like the earliest human writing, a pattern buried so deep in history it had been forgotten. Suddenly, Rico's device beeped, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from the ship's AI. Lieutenant Rico, I have located an anomaly in the data logs from the artifact's signal. I suggest you review it immediately. Rico's heart skipped a beat. Another layer of mystery. He quickly activated the data feed on his device, and the screen flickered to life. The artifact's signal, once chaotic and unclear, now showed a consistent pattern, a rhythm. There was an underlying order in the data, but the deeper he dug, the more his unease grew. The signal was human. Not alien, human. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. How could that be? The Nebula Voyager had been in deep space, far from any known human settlement. It was impossible for a human signal to be so far out. And yet, here it was, buried in the artifact's strange transmission. Rico wasted no time. He rushed to Captain Jorah's quarters, where she was already waiting for him. "Captain, I need to show you something," Rico said urgently. Jorah looked up, her expression calm but inquisitive. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Rico quickly explained the anomaly in the data and handed her his device. As she scanned the information, her brow furrowed in disbelief. The signal, it was unmistakably human, but it was decades old, possibly centuries. "What are you suggesting?" Jorah asked, her voice tight with suspicion. "I'm suggesting," Rico replied, "that the artifact, it's not just alien. It's tied to human history, something long forgotten." Before Jorah could respond, an alert sounded throughout the ship. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, we have a situation. A human has been found aboard the ship. It's alive." Jorah's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, alive? How?" The voice on the intercom was shaky. I don't know, Captain. We've got someone in the med bay. He looks like a human, but it's like he's been in stasis for 100 years. A chill ran down Jorah's spine. This was no coincidence. "Lead the way," Jorah said, her voice firm as she turned to Rico. "Let's see who, or what, this is." The two of them rushed to the med bay, where a small team of doctors was gathered around a strange figure lying on a table. At first glance, the man appeared normal, at least by human standards. But there was something odd about him. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his hair was thin and wispy, like it had been frozen in time. His eyes were closed, but his expression was calm, as if he had been in a deep sleep for an eternity. "This can't be real," Rico whispered under his breath, his gaze fixed on the man. "He looks preserved." Dr. Lee, the ship's lead medical officer, turned to Jorah as she approached. "Captain, this man is not only alive, but he shows no signs of aging. We don't know how he survived, or how he's even here." Jorah's mind raced. A human, preserved in stasis, possibly for centuries. This was far beyond anything they had ever encountered. But there was more. She could feel it. Something about this man seemed to be connected to the alien artifact, to the strange signal, to the bumper stickers, everything. "We need answers," Jorah said, her voice tight. "Bring him to the command center. If this man is truly human, he may hold the key to everything we found." With the man carefully transported to the command center, the crew gathered, trying to make sense of the enigma before them. But the moment the man was placed in a chair and the restraints were removed, he stirred. Slowly, his eyes opened, revealing irises that gleamed with an otherworldly glow, almost unnatural. Captain Jorah stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft yet commanding. Where did you come from? The man blinked, his gaze flicking from Jara to Rico, then to the rest of the crew. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice that seemed as ancient as the stars themselves, he spoke. I am the token human. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. The token human. It was a name that resonated with power, with history. The crew exchanged confused glances. They had never heard of anything like this before. What does that mean? Jara pressed, her tone sharper now. How are you alive? What happened to you? The man smiled faintly, as if he knew something they didn't, something they would never fully understand. I've been waiting, he said softly, waiting for you. And with that, the crew felt an icy chill run through them. It was clear. They had found something far more dangerous and profound than they had ever imagined. And they had just awakened a force that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. The hidden message. The command center of the Nebula Voyager was silent. The crew stood around the mysterious man who called himself the token human. His presence was both unsettling and intriguing, a paradox that tugged at their minds. The ship's sensors had scanned him thoroughly, but there was no explanation for how he had survived, how he had been preserved in stasis for so long. The records on the artifact were just as baffling. They had uncovered no direct link between the human race and the alien technology they had found, yet the signals, the symbols, and now this man, they all pointed towards something bigger. Captain Jara paced the command center, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental. The human survivor, the object, the cryptic messages, it all had to be connected. But to what? Lieutenant Rico, she began, turning toward him. I want a full analysis of the artifact's signal. I know it's human. I need to know how it was broadcast. Was it a one-time message, or is it still active? Rico nodded, his fingers moving rapidly across his console. I'm on it, Captain, but there's something strange about the signal itself. It's layered, almost like it's encoded within other frequencies. What do you mean by encoded? Jara asked, her curiosity piqued. Rico hesitated, his brow furrowing as he re-examined the data. The signal seems to have multiple layers of encryption, some of it biological, some of it electronic, almost as if it's designed to be understood by a human, or someone who knows how to decode it. I think it's a message, but it's hidden. Jorah's gaze shifted back to the token human, who had been eerily quiet since his cryptic introduction. His eyes were closed now, as if he were meditating, or perhaps waiting for something. The crew's attempts to speak to him had yielded little. His answers were short and enigmatic, never giving away much. But there was something in the way he looked at them, something that suggested he knew more than he let on. We need to wake him up, Jara said suddenly. We need him to tell us what this all means. Rico gave her a wary look. Captain, he's been in stasis for what could be centuries. We don't know if it's safe to. I don't care, she interrupted. He knows something, I need him to tell me. Now. Jara's tone brooked no argument, and Rico reluctantly began to interface with the medical systems. The man had been kept in cryostasis for an unknown amount of time, but the equipment was state-of-the-art, built to handle these types of operations. After a few tense moments, the systems began to hum as a light shone down on the token human. His body stirred, but his eyes remained closed. What happened? The token human finally muttered, his voice gravelly, as though he had not spoken in ages. You've been in stasis, Jara said, her voice steady but urgent. For how long? Why are you here? The token human blinked slowly, his eyes focusing with a slow, deliberate motion. There was no fear in him, no confusion, just a deep, unsettling calm. He seemed to be studying them, sizing them up, as though he were the one in control of the situation. I've been waiting, he whispered, his voice soft but carrying a weight of unspoken history. Waiting for the right moment to awaken. Jara's patience was running thin. Why? What is this place? What do the messages mean? The bumper stickers, the artifact. What are you trying to tell us? The token human smiled faintly, but his gaze remained distant. The messages are not for you, Captain. They are for humanity. They always have been. Rico raised an eyebrow. Humanity? You mean the human race? He asked. But how could you know what's going on out here? The token human's smile faded. It is not a matter of knowing. It is a matter of remembering. I was part of a forgotten program. A project designed to protect humanity from something much larger than you could understand. A sudden wave of cold washed over the room. The words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of something terrible. Jara leaned forward. A program? What kind of program? The token human looked at each of them, his gaze lingering on Jara, as if weighing whether to share the truth. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with a strained reverence. We were the guardians of the future. We were tasked with preserving the memory of humanity's true past, to keep it safe until the time was right. The artifact, the billboards, the bumper stickers, it's all part of a message. A warning. A warning about what? Jara asked, the tension rising in her chest. He took a deep breath, and for the first time, the crew saw something flicker in his eyes. Was it fear? Regret? The war, he said simply. The one humanity fought and lost, and the enemy that remains. The room went still, the weight of his words sinking in. A war? The human race had fought and lost a war. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but they didn't make sense. You're saying that humanity fought a war against an alien force? Rico asked, his voice incredulous. The token human nodded gravely. Yes, and the result of that war is why you found the artifact. It's why humanity was scattered, erased from history, its legacy buried. The signal you're picking up, it's a call to arms. A rallying cry for those who remember. Jara's head spun. Rallying cry. For who? For the survivors, he said quietly, those who are still out there, and for those who will rise again when the time is right. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. The weight of his words hung over them, but there was one more question burning in Jara's mind, one that she couldn't ignore. Why now? She asked. Why wake up now, after all this time? Why not sooner? The token human's eyes narrowed, his expression darkening. Because the enemy is waking up too, and when they do, humanity will need to be ready. The air in the room seemed to grow colder as the truth began to set in. The crew had thought they were exploring some strange relic, something to study, something to unlock. But now they realized they were standing on the edge of a terrible secret, one that had been buried for centuries. The enemy that had been defeated so long ago wasn't gone. It was still out there, and whatever it was coming back. Jara's heart raced, her mind scrambling to process the implications. The past was not just a series of forgotten battles. It was a warning about something far worse than any of them could imagine. We need to act fast, Captain Jara said, her voice now filled with urgency. Prepare the crew. We don't know when they'll strike, but we have to be ready. The token human's eyes flickered with something, perhaps approval, perhaps sorrow, but he said nothing more. Instead, he simply stood up, his body shifting with an ancient grace, as if ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey had only just begun, and the greatest danger of all had yet to reveal itself. The forgotten war. The Nebula Voyager was a flurry of activity, the crew scrambling to process the revelations from the token human. The war, the enemy, the artifacts, the long-forgotten history of humanity buried beneath layers of time, space, and secrecy. The ship's halls were filled with an energy of urgency as everyone worked to prepare for what they now knew was coming. Captain Jara stood in the observation deck, staring out at the void of space, her mind racing. The token human's words echoed in her head, a constant reminder of the task ahead. The enemy was awakening, and they were far more than just a physical threat. They were something ancient, something that had been hiding in the shadows of the galaxy, waiting for the right moment to strike. Captain, we've finished analyzing the signal. Rico's voice crackled over the comm. It's worse than we thought. Jara snapped back to reality, her heart skipping a beat. Worse how? Rico paused for a moment, his voice tense when he responded. The signal wasn't just a call for humanity. It was a beacon, a way of waking up something tied to that war. It's been dormant for eons, but it's waking up now. Jara's stomach churned. And where is it waking up? That's just it, Rico said. We've traced the signal to a nearby system, one that wasn't on any of our charts, a system that's been erased from history. Jara clenched her fists. Erased from history? How is that possible? Rico's voice was grim. The system is classified, Captain. There's nothing in the records about it. It's as though it never existed. But the signal, it's coming from there, and the scans show massive energy spikes. Jara turned toward the bridge and made her way there quickly. Keep me posted. I'm heading to the command center now. As Jara entered the command center, her mind was already racing through their options. The Nebula Voyager wasn't equipped to handle a direct confrontation with an unknown force, especially one that had been hiding in the shadows for so long. They needed more information, and they needed it fast. I'm initiating a course change, Jara said as she took her seat at the command chair. Set a course for the system Rico just flagged. We're going to find out what's going on. The crew sprang into action, rerouting power and plotting a new course. But even as they moved into position, something was weighing on Jara's mind, the forgotten war. The token human had hinted at it, but he had never fully explained what had happened. What was humanity's role in it, and why had they lost? Captain, we've arrived at the coordinates. Rico's voice came through the comms once more, his tone tight. There's nothing here, just empty space. Jara's brow furrowed. Are you sure? The signal was coming from this system. I'm positive, Captain, Rico replied. But there's a massive energy anomaly just ahead. I can't explain it. It's like a fracture in space-time. Jara's eyes narrowed. A fracture. Could this be the result of the war the token human had mentioned? A battle so catastrophic that it tore a hole in the fabric of space itself. Bring us closer, Jara ordered. I want to see this anomaly with my own eyes. As the Nebula Voyager approached the coordinates, the crew gathered around the observation windows. The stars around them seemed to twist, swirling in unnatural patterns. The ship's sensors were malfunctioning, blinking erratically as if the very fabric of space around them was unstable. There's something out there, Zyla, the ship's engineer said, her voice shaking. It's not a ship, but it's massive. It's like a rift, but it's alive. Jara's heart pounded as the truth hit her. The enemy. It wasn't just an alien force, it was something far older, something that had found a way to manipulate space itself. The war had left a scar on the galaxy, a scar that was now waking up. We need to get closer, Captain Jara said, her voice steely with resolve. We have to know what we're dealing with. The ship edged closer to the anomaly, the strange rift growing larger as they approached. Suddenly, the entire ship shuddered as a wave of energy pulsed from the rift, shaking the Nebula Voyager to its core. What the hell was that? Rico shouted, gripping the edge of his console. Shields up. Full power. Jara barked. Get us out of here. But as the crew scrambled to regain control of the ship, they saw something that made their blood run cold. Out of the rift, a massive figure emerged, its form shifting and morphing in a way that defied logic. It wasn't just a ship, it was a living, breathing entity, an ancient being that seemed to exist beyond the laws of physics. It's alive, Zyla whispered, her voice trembling with awe and fear. The creature's form pulsed with an unnatural light, and as it loomed closer to the Nebula Voyager, the ship's systems began to fail. The lights flickered, and the navigation systems went dark. It was as though the very presence of the creature was draining the life from their vessel. We can't fight this, Rico shouted. We need to get out of here now. But it was too late. The rift had opened fully, and the creature was now fully visible. Its size was incomprehensible, its shape constantly shifting as if made from living shadows. It seemed to breathe in slow, deliberate movements, each exhale sending waves of distortion through space. Its glowing tendrils reached out toward the ship, sending a pulse of energy that made the Nebula Voyager lurch violently. "We're losing control," Zilla cried, her hands frantically trying to reroute power. "I can't." Then, through the chaos, the token human's voice came over the comms. It was calm, almost serene, as if he had anticipated everything. "You have to fight it," he said softly. "You are not alone. This is where the war begins again. This is where humanity's future is decided." Jorah's heart skipped a beat. Fight it? How could they fight something like this? But the token human's words gave her no time for hesitation. She knew what she had to do. The artifact, the symbols, the bumper stickers, everything had been leading to this moment. The time to learn, to understand, was now over. It was time to act. "Activate the secondary systems," Jorah ordered, her voice steely. "We'll take a different approach." The crew scrambled to follow her instructions. They couldn't defeat this enemy in a conventional way, but they could outsmart it. They had the artifact, they had the signals, and most importantly, they had each other. As Jorah prepared to make her final move, she looked out the window, her eyes narrowing as the massive entity loomed closer. There was no turning back now. The war had come to their doorstep. The awakening of the Guardian. The Nebula Voyager was in freefall, drifting uncontrollably toward the dark heart of the anomaly. The alien entity, something more like a living rift than a creature, loomed above them, its tendrils of light reaching out, distorting the very fabric of space. Every pulse of energy sent shockwaves through the ship, shutting down systems and sending alarms blaring. Captain Jorah's hands flew over the control panels, but the ship's systems were becoming increasingly unresponsive. "Status report," Jorah shouted, her voice sharp. Zia, the engineer, was frantically trying to restore power. "Shields are at 40%, Captain. The engines are offline. I'm trying to reroute auxiliary power, but it's slow. If we don't regain control soon, we'll be sucked into the rift." Jorah's mind raced. They were running out of time. The enemy was not just a force of destruction, it was something much older, something that could tear apart reality itself. They needed to act fast, and they needed a way to fight back. "Lieutenant Rico," she called, turning to her tactical officer. "What's our best chance of survival here?" Rico's face was pale, but his eyes were sharp. "Captain, I don't know how to fight something like this. It's not a ship, it's not even a creature. It's something else. If it has control over space-time, we may need to counteract it on a quantum level, but we have no way of accessing that kind of technology." A pulse of energy from the rift rocked the ship again, sending the crew stumbling. But through the chaos, Jorah heard the voice of the token human, calm and steady. "You can fight it," he said, his words coming through the comms with eerie clarity. "You have the means. The artifact, it holds the key." Jorah's heart raced. The artifact, could it really help them? They'd spent so long trying to understand its origins, its purpose, but had they truly unlocked its potential? "Token human, what do you mean?" Jorah demanded, gripping her console with both hands as another wave of energy blasted the ship. "The artifact was never just a signal," the token human replied, his voice unwavering. "It's a guardian, a key to the ancient defense network that protected humanity during the war. It has the power to fight this enemy, but only if you understand it, only if you believe in it." "Believe in it," Rico repeated incredulously. "What does that even mean?" The token human didn't answer directly. Instead, he spoke with a quiet urgency. "The artifact has chosen you, Captain. It recognizes you as a protector of humanity's future. The same way the original Guardians once wielded its power. You must trust in its design. It can help you." "Where do we start?" Jorah asked, her voice steady despite the panic she could feel rising within her. "Look inside it," the token human answered. "Not just the surface, the heart of it." At that moment, Jara understood. They had been so focused on the external elements of the artifact, the symbols, the signals, the messages, never considering what it was meant to do. It wasn't just a message or a tool, it was a weapon, and it had been waiting for the right moment to awaken. "Zyla," Jara said, her voice firm, "find the central control panel for the artifact. We need to interface with it. Now." Zyla hesitated, then nodded. "On it, Captain. But there's a problem. We've been able to find the artifact's power sources, but there's no direct interface. It's almost like it was designed to only respond to certain triggers." Jara's eyes widened as the pieces clicked together. Triggers. It responds to humans, and it's waiting for us to understand its true purpose. Rico looked at her with a dawning realization. "You think the artifact will activate if we connect with it on a deeper level?" Jara nodded. "We don't have time to waste. We're all we have left. If the artifact truly holds the key to defeating this thing, then we'll have to find a way to unlock its power." Zilla worked quickly, scanning the ship's systems for any connection that could interface with the artifact. The ship trembled again as the entity outside sent another pulse of energy toward them, causing the lights to flicker. "Captain, I've located a possible entry point. It's a neural interface, like a biological connection," Zyla said. "I can patch into the artifact using the ship's secondary comm system, but we need to connect with it directly. This might get complicated." "Do it," Jara ordered. "We're out of options." Zyla's fingers flew across the controls as the crew braced themselves for what was about to happen. The air in the command center grew tense, thick with the weight of uncertainty. Would this work? Or was it another gamble they'd lose? With a deep breath, Jara closed her eyes for a brief moment, focusing her thoughts. If they were to survive this, they needed to act as one, trusting in the artifact and in each other. She didn't know how she knew, but in that moment, she understood the artifact's purpose. It was designed to connect with humanity, to empower them, to channel their will and their unity into something greater. The ship's systems hummed with a strained resonance, and then the artifact began to respond. It wasn't a flash of light or an explosion of power. It was something subtler, something more profound. The ship's hull reverberated, like the heartbeat of the Nebula Voyager had synchronized with the pulse of the artifact. Zilla looked up, her eyes wide. "It's working, Captain. The artifact's resonating with the ship's core." A deep, rumbling sound filled the ship, and Jara felt it, an ancient power, a force long dormant, awakening. It wasn't just the artifact. It was something inside her, something that was becoming a part of her. "The artifact is connected to you, Captain." The token human's voice came again, this time softer, as if he was speaking to her directly. "It's choosing you. You are now the guardian, and it will respond to your will." Jara's heart pounded as she gripped the controls. She could feel the artifact's power coursing through her, like a current of electricity, alive, sentient. It wasn't just responding to her commands, it was listening to her thoughts, to her emotions. She was no longer just a captain in command of a ship. She was part of something far greater. "Prepare yourselves," Jara said, her voice filled with a new sense of purpose. "The Guardian is waking, and it will fight." In that moment, the ship's energy systems flared to life. The rift in space began to shimmer and distort as the alien entity recoiled, its tendrils of light pulling back, as if it could sense the rise of something powerful. The creature, once so dominant, seemed to falter in the face of the new force that was awakening. The token human's final words echoed in Jara's mind. "The war is not over. It has just begun." And in that instant, Jara realized that the fight was not just for survival, it was for the future of humanity itself. The final confrontation. The Nebula Voyager was no longer the same ship it had been. The crew had felt it first, a hum in the air, a vibration that ran through their bones. The artifact, now fully activated, had infused the ship with an almost unnatural energy, bending space around it as if the ship were no longer bound by the laws of physics. It pulsed in time with Jorah's heartbeat, and the crew could sense it too. There was a power here that they couldn't fully comprehend, but they didn't need to. It was their only chance at survival. Jorah stood in the command center, her fingers gently resting on the controls. Her mind was no longer just guiding the ship, she was the ship. She could feel every circuit, every fiber of the Nebula Voyager, and more importantly, she could feel the artifact's energy. It was alive, sentient, and responsive to her every thought. She had become its conduit, the channel through which its power flowed. "We're ready," Rico said from his post, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. He wasn't just the tactical officer anymore. With the artifact's awakening, he too had become attuned to its presence. It had given him clarity, sharpened his instincts. Zilla was at her console, her fingers dancing over the keys, coordinating the systems that now worked in tandem with the artifact. The once dying engines hummed with an eerie new power, their pulse in sync with the artifact's beat. "The anomaly is destabilizing," she said, her voice full of awe. "It's like we've become its antithesis. It's reacting to us, as if it knows we're a threat." "We are," Jorah replied, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "And it's time we show it that it's not the only one who can shape reality." The rift outside the ship had grown massive, stretching out in all directions like a living wound in the fabric of space. The entity, now fully emerged from the rift, loomed before them, its form ever shifting, an amorphous mass of light and shadow, as if it were made from the very chaos it commanded. Its presence sent waves of distortion through space, bending the stars themselves. Its tendrils stretched out, coiling toward the Nebula Voyager, its energy reaching out like an insatiable hunger. "I've identified its core," Rico said, his eyes focused on the tactical screens. "It's located in the heart of the anomaly, at the center of the rift. If we can destroy that, we can collapse the entire system and neutralize the entity." Jorah nodded, already aware of the risk. "We'll need to send everything we've got at it, every last ounce of power from the artifact. We don't get a second shot at this." As the Nebula Voyager closed the distance, the creature seemed to sense their intentions. The air crackled with tension, and the rift pulsed violently, sending shockwaves through space. The energy field surrounding the entity flared to life, an impenetrable barrier of distorted reality that seemed to shield the core from any direct attack. "We can't breach it," Zilla said, panic creeping into her voice. "The rift itself is protecting the core. We'll need to break through the distortion first." Jorah's mind raced. "I can break through it," she said, surprising even herself with the certainty in her voice. "The artifact is the key. It's not just power, it's understanding. It's the key to unlocking the force that created the rift in the first place." Rico looked at her, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Captain, are you sure? You're asking us to risk everything on something we don't fully understand. We have no idea what will happen if you try to interface with the entity directly." "I know what will happen," Jorah replied, locking eyes with him. "The artifact has chosen me, Rico. I'm not just its conduit. I am its chosen guardian, and I can do this." The token human's voice resonated in her mind once more. "You are humanity's protector. The power is within you, but it must be unleashed with purpose. The artifact is not just a weapon, it is a shield. A shield that protects against the darkness that seeks to consume. Trust in it. Trust in yourself." With a deep breath, Jorah reached forward, placing her hands on the artifact's control console. She could feel it, its presence, surging through her, as though it were an extension of her own soul. In that moment, the ship seemed to come alive around her. The artifact's energy flowed into her veins, and with it, the power to reshape reality itself. The rift before them was no longer a barrier. It was a challenge, a test of wills. "Now," Jorah whispered. She closed her eyes, and the Nebula Voyager seemed to shudder. Power surged through the ship like a tidal wave, and the artifact's energy coiled around the ship, binding it to her will. With a single thought, Jara sent a pulse of energy toward the rift. It was not a blast of raw destruction. It was a wave of understanding, a force that unraveled the chaos, piece by piece. The distortion around the rift began to fracture. The shields that had protected the creature's core flickered and failed. The stars beyond the rift twisted, their light dimming as Jara's energy tore through the veil. The entity howled, if it could even be said to have a voice, and its tendrils recoiled, as though in pain. Its form began to shift, its fluid shape losing cohesion as Jara's power reached deeper into the heart of the rift. I'm holding it together, Zella said, her voice shaking. But we're almost there. One more push, Captain. We need to take out the core now. Jara nodded, her grip tightening on the console. She could feel the very heartbeat of the Nebula Voyager as if it were her own. She focused all of the artifact's energy on the core of the anomaly, the creature's source of power. Every fiber of her being aligned with the artifact's force, and then, with one final surge, she unleashed everything. The rift shattered. A blinding explosion of light engulfed the ship, and for a moment, it felt as though time itself had come undone. But the explosion was not a destructive force. It was a cleansing, a purging of the chaos that had plagued the galaxy for so long. When the light finally faded, the rift was gone. The entity, its core destroyed, had dissolved into the void, leaving behind nothing but the echoes of its terrible presence. The Nebula Voyager hung motionless in the wake of the battle, the stars outside now calm, as though nothing had ever disturbed them. The ship's systems slowly came back online, and the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. We did it, Rico whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. Jara slumped back in her chair, exhausted, her hands trembling from the power she had wielded. She had done it. They had done it. Together, they had fought back against an ancient evil and emerged victorious. But even as they celebrated their survival, Jara knew the truth. This victory was just the beginning. The artifact had shown them a glimpse of humanity's past, but also its future. The war was not over. It had only just been reborn. The token human's final words reverberated in her mind. This is just the first step. The universe is vast, and its secrets are waiting to be uncovered. You are humanity's last hope. The Guardian will always be with you. Jara looked out at the stars once more. The Nebula Voyager had passed its test. Now, it was time to prepare for the journey ahead, for the battles yet to come. The war had only just begun.